Recently, I attended Vancouver's first ever Riftbound Regional event. Now, if you're new to the channel, here's something important to know. I'm a middle-aged guy who only recently got into trading card games. So naturally, I thought it'd be a great idea to jump into one of the biggest and most competitive Riftbound tournaments ever held. What could possibly go wrong? Well, as expected, I didn't make day 2. But surprisingly, I didn't completely embarrass myself either. I finished the event with a 1-3 record, picked up my first regional match win, learned a lot about competitive Riftbound, and came away with some thoughts about the event itself. So today I want to talk about my experience at the Vancouver Regional, both the good and the bad. One thing that immediately stood out was just how massive the event was. Before round 1 even started, over 2,000 registrants were showing up in the Riftbound event tracker. The final number was lower once no-shows and drops were accounted for, but Riot still reported roughly 1,500 players competing in the main event. For someone who mostly plays casually, walking into a room with that many competitors was honestly pretty impressive. The regional was a 2-day tournament. Day 1 consisted of 8 rounds, and to advance to Day 2 you needed 18 points, which basically meant winning 6 matches. The moment you picked up your third loss, your chances of advancing were effectively over. That's exactly what happened to me. I decided to play Master Yi Wuju Master. And yes, I know, this variation of Master Yi isn't considered a top-tier competitive choice. But I've always been drawn towards off-meta strategies, and I wanted to play something I was comfortable with. Apparently, only 18 players in the entire event made the same decision. Looking back, I probably wasn't as prepared as I should have been. Sure, I understood my deck, I understood my cards. What I wasn't prepared for were the matchups. My losses came against Azir, Misfortune, and Rengar. The Azir player overwhelmed me with soldier tokens before I could stabilize. The Misfortune matchup completely got away from me once cards like Dazzling Aurora and some massive threats started hitting the board. And against Rengar, I simply wasn't experienced enough to navigate all of the ambush interactions. Every loss felt less like my deck failing and more like me running into situations I hadn't practiced enough. My one victory came against Yasuo. That game was a lot more fun. I was able to build up Master Yi's XP without much interference, eventually reaching 11 XP. At that point, Master Yi Unstoppable really lives up to its name. For one glorious match, everything worked exactly as intended. One thing I regret is dropping too early. After my third loss, I retired from the main event because I knew I couldn't make Day 2. But Riftbound also rewards players for best performing player of each legend. The best Master Yi player finished 5-3. Would I have suddenly gone on a 4-match winning streak? Probably not. But looking back, I think I should have played at least one more round. Even if I didn't improve my final record much, the extra experience would have been valuable. And honestly, that's one of the biggest takeaways from the weekend. If you're attending your first regional, keep playing. You're already there, get as many reps as possible. My biggest criticism of the event wasn't the competition. It was the pacing. Day 1 started at 10 AM. Round 8 didn't finish until after 10 PM. That's 12 hours for 8 rounds. And it wasn't because matches were especially exciting. A lot of rounds were going into overtime. Riftbound currently uses an overtime system similar to Magic the Gathering, where players receive extra turns after time is called. The problem is that there isn't a hard cap on how long these extra turns take. As a result, many rounds were extending 20 to 30 minutes beyond their scheduled end. The organizers repeatedly reminded players to report slow play, which tells me that they were aware it was becoming an issue. Personally, I'd love to see Riftbound adopt something closer to what Bandai Games or Grand Archive use, either a fixed overtime period or stricter end-of-round procedure. Because 12-hour tournament days are rough, especially for older players like me. After dropping from the main event, I jumped into my first Riftbound draft. Unfortunately, that experience was a little chaotic. The draft itself had some confusion, delays, and players dropping throughout the event. What surprised me most was that once drafting ended, we weren't paired against players from our own draft pod. I've played and watched enough TCGs to expect pod-based play, so it felt strange. Beyond that, there were several organization hiccups throughout the weekend. The event actually ran out of Poppy participation promos that attendees were promised. Communication sometimes felt unclear. Announcements for different events overlapped because everything was happening in one large hall. None of these issues ruined the weekend, but they definitely made things feel less polished than I expected from such a major event. Another thing that surprised me was just how little there was to do if you weren't actively playing. I expected more of a convention atmosphere. Maybe more League of Legends content, more side attractions, more spectator-friendly viewing areas. Instead, the focus was very much on playing Riftbound. And that's not necessarily bad, but it did make the venue feel a little underwhelming at times. The vendor areas were fairly small, the Riot store was fine but didn't carry everything players were looking for, and surprisingly there weren't many younger players attending. Most participants seemed to be adults. For a game that wants to continue growing, I'd love to see future events put more emphasis on attracting new and younger players. Would I do this again? Absolutely. Without hesitation. Despite the long rounds, despite the organization frustrations, despite finishing 1-3, I'm glad I went. There's a huge difference between watching competitive Riftbound online and actually sitting across from an opponent in a regional setting. I learned more in 4 matches than I probably would have learned in weeks of casual play. Next time though, I'll be better prepared. I'll get more practice, I'll probably attend more side events, and I'll think a little harder about whether I want to bring Master Yi into a field full of meta decks. Although knowing me, I'll probably still play something off meta. Overall, Vancouver's first Riftbound Regional was a memorable experience. The competition was strong, the turnout was impressive, and it was great seeing players travel from across North America to attend this. There are definitely things Riot can improve for future events, especially regarding match pacing and communication, but for a first regional in Vancouver, I think it was a solid start. Now I'm curious, did you attend the Vancouver Regional? How did your experience compare to mine? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing for more Riftbound, Grand Archive, and other TCG content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.